When I got into the ambulance, which came to pick me up at home, I was with my son, whose face showed worry and fear. But an uncontrollable fear came over me as I had difficulty breathing. I thought I would be placed in a sitting position, but the ambulance crew saw right away that I had to lie down on the stretcher and be administered oxygen. I was taken to the emergency room of the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona at 3 o'clock in the morning. Upon my arrival, I was under observation for some time, and during this period, hundreds of images were going through my mind. I was then taken to a room to be in isolation where I was to be treated for COVID-19. As I entered this room, I saw another patient, a man who seemed to be asleep, and the only thing I noticed were his swollen hands, and that was enough to heighten my fears. I was assigned to a bed next to his. I was given medication and tests, and was then asked to turn off the lights and rest. But it became impossible because of the fear that overtook me. I started to think about my mother, deceased, who was an amazing caregiver. Maybe she could give me a hand. I asked her to take care of me in these crucial moments, as I desperately needed her help. I also thought of my father, also deceased, and during his lifetime, he wasn't as great a caretaker as my mother, even though I know he loved me very much, and I am sure that he would dare done everything in his power to push my mother to help me. I've never been religious, but yes, very respectful. So if a prayer could help in some moment, I pray. The one prayer I find most heartfelt is Our Father. From deep inside the hole I had fallen into, I prayed over and over again in my state of confusion and fear. I didn't know how this could have happened, and so fast. The night seemed eternal. I felt as if the hands of my watch didn't move, and I was unable to get up from my bed, and once again felt stomach pain. I soiled the bed, and on several occasions, the nurses, males and females, were so empathetic and compassionate and reassured me not to worry, that they would take care of everything. It was as if I lost all my dignity, or at least this was how I felt. It was impossible to control my bodily functions, as I couldn't help myself. The following day, I had the first visit from the doctor, who explained to me that the blood work showed results which were improvements against the virus. However, there was a serious viral impact in my system, but that I was responding with the medication. The most painful thing for me was to move in bed, as every movement I made caused intense pressure on my lungs. I couldn't control the coughing. I experienced a very strange pain. I was asked if the cough was dry or productive, and I honestly couldn't reply. All I could do was try to hold on to my dignity as best as I could, if once again I soiled the bed, having to change diapers, and the fear. Above all, fear was the worst. What had happened? What was going to happen? Anything was possible, or maybe just less. I could grasp how my body was reacting. After 2 or 3 days, the breathing pain did not improve. Despite the administration of oxygen, the doctors concluded that I would have to be admitted to intensive care unit. The thought of this was overwhelmingly scary. It seemed that there was an alternative treatment, which was an anti-inflammatory for the lungs. And if I was lucky, this could have a significant improvement and avoid having to go to the ECMO. I held on to this ray of hope, and once again thought of my family, parents and friends, who were all supporting me and willing to help in whatever way they could. It worked. The corticoids reduced the inflammation just enough to avoid having to be in the ECMO. I had no other alternative than to push my trust in the doctor's expertise. I had no appetite. I couldn't take in food. Even though the food was good and well cooked, it tasted bitter and salty, and it was completely put off any type of food. I ate small amounts since I knew I had to eat something, but I left most of the food in the plate. So this is how the first week went. 8 of 9 days of intense pain and fear. I spent my days reading and watching posts on WhatsApp that my family and friends said. I received so much love and emotional support from everyone. It was outstanding, amazing. I wasn't surprised. I honestly felt love. I also knew that my wife and 2 sons were so worried when I was being treated for COVID-19. They were 100% confined at home, and I began to worry that they could also have symptoms of the virus, which would complicate the situation even more. At any rate, I could do absolutely nothing, and this made my worries even mount up about what could possibly happen. Fortunately, everyone was fine at home, and this was such a relief to hear this news every day. One day my wife explained that she had been getting headache, which scared me a lot. But in the end, everything was fine. Knowing that everyone at home was doing well also helped me to feel better day by day. The corticoid medication was taking effect. The blood test proved so. Suddenly, that awful taste in my mouth went away, and I could begin to eat. I was also able to get change on my own in bed, and even though it took a lot of effort, at least I had the strength to move around the bed without help. One night, I had hiccups, which lasted hours, and at the same time, chest pain. Once again, I was afraid and hoping this discomfort would go away, and finally it did. At night, I had asked for a sleep aid, which helped me very much. I was able to sleep for a few solid hours during the days and nights, and waiting for the blood test to be done, vital signs be taken, injections. All of the nursing staff were dressed in the most extreme protective gear that after 15 days I got to know their names but couldn't recognize their faces because they were always wearing masks. They were all very professional, giving instructions at the door as not to come into the room. There was a team of nurses outside the room and another inside. I had asked for orange juice in the middle of the night. They announced that they will enter it into the room when they were ready. The light at the end of the tunnel became more and more visible in terms of my ability to breathe better. A psychologist called me to offer her help. I explained that time was dragging on, as if my watch had stopped, as if watches didn't exist. The entire feeling was so strange. I felt relaxed to hear her reply that when suffering exists, time passes very slowly. And on hearing this, it seemed to bring me relief. It felt like magic and so emotional when I was able to connect with the outside world through WhatsApp and could read the messages being sent. Many of my friends wanted to talk, but I had no voice yet. I could also feel myself choking due to the oxygen mask, the air drying my nasal passages, making speaking even more complicated. I was making minimal improvements, and this positive news gave me hope. I was able to move around in my bed. My cough disappeared. I didn't have to be admitted to the ICU for sure. My temperature, blood pressure, and electrocardiogram results were normal. However, X-ray results and scans were not showing progress, and perhaps there was a lesion on my lungs which could persist long term. Continuous oxygen had to be administered in order to maintain a stable level to improve my condition. After a few more days, a noticeable improvement showed that the need for oxygen could be reduced, and finally, I would be able to breathe on my own. I wanted to forget all of this odyssey as soon as possible, but friends gave me so much encouragement to express my experience anonymously, which is how I prefer to first make an audio recording and then in writing. In my experience, could help someone if can help in similar situation. This is the reason I did it. I am fine now and will soon be able to get back to my normal routine without permanent lesions. My outlook is optimistic. My doctors told me that I will recuperate fully. For what I have seen and have said earlier, and while talking to friends, I have shared my hospital room with 90-year-old men who have overcome the virus without permanent lesions. I have seen 2 cases. The first was my roommate, Joan, the person I mentioned at the beginning of my experience. I saw how happy he felt upon receiving his discharge, although needing support of oxygen home, following a month stay in the hospital. The second case I experienced was Zacharias, a 90-year-old man from Asturias who was my second roommate. His condition seems worse to me and was very worried about him. As his condition improved, he sometimes in the afternoon started singing to the nurses. I was asked if this bothered me, but no, I felt so happy for him. He was undoubtedly recovering. Coincidentally, his granddaughter was his doctor and mine too, who called him Yayo, grandfather. And he, every time she came, would ask her for a kiss, but of course she was not allowed. Zacharias would ask again, and she had to turn him down. This dialogue gives me, fill me with happiness, because I remembered seeing him suffering next to me during the night, how he soiled the bed and when he had to be changed. He was complicated patient, but at the same time progressing and soon to be discharged. I'd rather not go on any longer explaining my experience. It's a summary of 19 days odyssey in the hospital. If my story can be helpful to anyone, it is my grain of sand to transmit hope and empathy. On the 27th of April, finally I was given my discharge papers and could go home. The ambulance picked me up at the door of the hospital, and I couldn't help but cry tears of joy. I even prayed Our Father. This beautiful poem, as explained earlier. My emotions surged as the ambulance turned every corner and I could appreciate my city once again. After a short ride, the ambulance parked near my house and I was able to walk on my own, while the driver carried my bag. Seeing the door of my house filled with emotion, a new feeling, like a child being given a precious gift. By coincidence, my dear friend Josep was waiting for me at the door with his wife. I opened the door and went upstairs. I knew that my wife and 2 sons were happily waiting for my arrival. The feelings I was experiencing at that moment were completely new, a feeling of walking into a new home, as new as the shining light of the Barcelona morning. The hallway I walked down through all these years seemed new to me. The bedroom where I spent so many nights appeared even more comfortable and soothing. Following the protocol of the hospital, I will have to be confined for 15 days, insulated in one area of the house. The word confinement is not the correct term. Instead, it's simply enjoying all the things that are familiar to me and make me feel at home. There are still some fears that remain fears, but I have to do everything within my power so that my family doesn't get sick, because it's still possible. During some days, I'll have to be extra careful, as the demands in the hospital are not the same as home. Above all, what really matters most is the emotional side, feeling strong and renewed, able to enjoy the space as if it were a hotel, or a place. I am home.